Okay, guys, our next presentation, let's welcome in Krakow Pascal Luban. Pascal, welcome.
Thank you very much. Hopefully this will work. Yes, my turn also to extend you my welcome. So, first we all know the hard fact regarding early game retention. When somebody plays free-to-play games, most of the time this player will just never return. This is what we call day one retention. And day one retention, usually it's around 20-30%. That means that on average, 3/4 of the player who discover your game for the first time, they just never come back. And if you think it's bad, well, actually, this is a fairly good figure because that figure can fall as low as 5% for a poorly designed game. Now, clearly, this is a real issue for the industry. Why? Because it's new gamers, new players are hard to attract. There's a lot of competition. And also, it's costly to get them to discover your game, especially if you have to buy traffic. So really, early day retention is a key issue. And it's a key issue that most game designers now have to handle. Now, of course, early day retention, it's not the only main issue that game designers have to tackle, of course. In terms of free-to-play designs, there are other important tasks, Obviously, the defining the monetization strategy. And here, of course, I just remind you that defining the monetization strategy, it is not to decide what you will sell as in a purchase. Defining the monetization strategy is to define how you convince people who are enjoying a free game, how you will convince them to spend money. So, it's not about what you sell, it's how you sell it. So, of course, that's a big issue. We understand all why. Another big issue, of course, is building long-term retention. And obviously, the goal of a game designer is also to build a compelling game experience. But we all understand that it's pointless to waste resources on those main issues if you don't have any players to play your game. So this is why early game retention, it's a major objective. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I will just make a small introduction and then I will be very practical. I will share with you what I believe are the best practices for tackling this issue. I'm also going to introduce myself briefly, so you know my name. I'm freelance. I've been in this business for 22 years, always as a freelance, which kind of makes me an unusual animal. However, being freelance gave me the opportunity to work on many things. I work on nearly all platforms for many different clients on many different genres. When console were really big, I worked essentially on console games, as you can see here, a few of them. More recently, I've worked obviously a lot on mobile titles because this is where the market was. And very recently, I'm back to PC hardcore titles on Steam. So it's kind of, my position is interesting because I'm like a surfer, on the crest of the wave, So I better not fall because the sharks could eat me. But at least, as long as I can stay on the wave, I'm really following the trends of the market. Anyway, so before I explain to you what I believe are the best practices, we need to do some psychology. We need to understand a little bit how a player discovers a free-to-play game for the first time, what he thinks. So, first of all, he's looking for a certain game experience. Think about the way, when you decide to try a game for the first time, especially a game on Facebook, on mobile, or even on Steam, what will drive you to try this game? Of course, maybe a friend of yours told you, hey, you should try this game, right? Okay, but most of the time you try this game because you like the title, you like screenshots, you like the theme. Maybe it's just the game icon. Something in the game made you say, aha, this is a topic that is of interesting to me. This game, is making me a promise of a certain experience. This is very important to understand. If you're interested in, let's say, the Native American, if you see a game title, if you see a game whose title is Geronimo's Life, you immediately understand, aha, this game is going to talk about something I like, I'm very interested in. So I expect this game to immerse me into the life and combat and, everything that has to do with Native Americans. So that means that when you want to try a game for the first time, usually there was something that drew you to that title and you expect to find this thing. Another thing also is that players, well, he knows this choice. I mean, there are just so many games out there that he knows, even if it's a casual gamer, he knows very well that there's just a lot of other players, other alternatives available out there. What else? He may also feel some anxiety. That's an interesting thing to know. Why would he feel anxiety? Well, either because he might think, well, will I be able to play this game? Will it be too hard? Will it be interesting? You know, this is typical of any game. The thing is that if you are on mobile or Facebook, if you are targeting a casual audience, you know, this is very important. You want anxiety to feel to fall very, very quickly. And finally, which maybe it's the most important thing to have in mind, is that the player, basically, he doesn't feel involved in the game because he has not purchased it. Now, this is very important regarding the psychology of player. Let me explain. When you buy a game, when you actually spend money in it, okay, even if it's 1 or 2 euros or whatever, you know, a little amount, okay, somehow, you know, you feel like you are a little bit engaged to that game, you know, because you've made the choice of putting some of your money, which is always precious, you know, into that game. That means that you buy the game, you try the game, and if the game doesn't look that good, you're still going to try to play it because you want to know, well, did I waste my money or not? Is it worth or not? That means that you accept to play much longer, and eventually, you know, the gameplay will kick in, and the game will become, the interest of the game will surface, and you will not regret your purchase. Okay? What about free games? Well, that's not the case. A free game, you know, nothing is holding you to the game. So if you don't like the game, just like that, you're just going to leave. This is why free, you know, it's both it's a boon for free-to-play games because whatever is free attracts people. The barrier to entry is very low. But at the same time, it's a curse. It's a curse because it has nothing, you know, it has nothing to retain players. So this is, you know, the state of mind of the player when he's about to try your free-to-play games. Now, having said that, and it's important that I spend some time on this point so you know exactly why I'm going to make my recommendations. Now let's go into what I believe are the best practices. So the first one, okay, get the player into the game as fast as possible. And I'm going to illustrate with an example. I will take the game called Criminal Face. Maybe you've heard about it. It's a hidden object game developed and published by Pretty Simple. Initially, it was published on Facebook, and then they had, you know, iOS and Android versions. Ultra popular game. At one moment, I think it was the second most popular game played on Facebook worldwide. So I'm just going to show you the beginning of the game so you understand this point. First screen, it's a splash screen. So you obviously immediately understand that the game is going to talk about criminal investigation. Second screen, you are immediately taken into a story. You've got this guy, I'm sorry, the slides are in French. The guy tells you, hey, there has been a murder has been mentioned, you know, you have to go and investigate. And of course, we immediately see some pictures, you know, we see this, the location of the murder, and, you know, the victim, you know, is a lovely young lady, blonde with a miniskirt, you know. So obviously, you know, that kind of reminds of what we find in some, you know, of many TV series which are a bit gory and so on. All right? Third screen, we are taken to the scene, and immediately, you know, first tutorial. It shows you how the game plays. So it's a hidden object. It's very simple. You've got a list of objects. You have to find them in the crime scene. Here, you know, they tell you exactly how it works. So you don't have any choice. You need to point exactly where they tell you to point, okay? Fourth screen, second tutorial, very brief. They tell you, well, in case you get in trouble, we've got a help feature, okay? And then that's it. Then you start playing. 5 screen. And you are into the heat of the game. Of course, the gameplay here is very simple, true, but it's real gameplay. It's not like, you know, pressing mindlessly on boring tutorials. No, you had 2 lines of tutorials, and immediately you were thrown into the game. That's what I mean by getting the player into the game as possible, because this is real gameplay. Okay, simple. You know, you can easily find the object, you know, and of course, this thing has been made in such a way that it's especially easy. Just look at the cigarette here. You know, I mean, if it was on scale, it would be about that size. Okay, so This thing was designed to be super simple, but at least it's rule gameplay because from here on, it's up to the player to find the, all the objects. So, why is that rule so important? Well, essentially because, as I said earlier, you've made a promise to the player, you've made the promise of a given experience, and you have to deliver it as soon as possible. The more screen explaining the game, going through menus and so on, before you put the player into actual gameplay, the more chances you have of losing them. This phenomenon is known very well by people who do websites, and especially websites where people can purchase things. There's what is called the purchasing funnel, where basically between the moment somebody goes to a website, a merchant website, to buy something, and the moment, he actually click on the button, pay, it is known that the more screens you've got, the more chances you have that this person will just never make any purchase and leave the site. It's exactly the same here. You've made a promise of a certain experience, you have to deliver it as quickly as possible. And remember here, what was the promise? Criminal investigation. This game is targeting people who, I guess in Poland and everywhere in the world, love TV series regarding crime. I mean, that's one of the most popular genres on TV today. And obviously, this game is making the promise. This is a casual game, obviously. This game is making the promise. Hey, you like TV crime series? Look, now you can play into one of them, and it's an easy gameplay adapted to you. So that's good illustration of what I say. Get your player into the game as soon as possible and deliver what he's looking for. Okay. The other reason, of course, is that you want the real gameplay to kick in as possible. Gameplay, this is what makes game exciting. Otherwise, we would be telling stories, on writing books, on doing movies, Gameplay is what makes our industry, our products so addictive. So, again, you want the gameplay to kick in as quickly as possible. A very bad introduction is to let the player, go through a tutorial and press key, press here, click there, and so on. This is very bad because this is no gameplay. Best practice number 2, add simple storytelling. Again, I will take an example from a game. It's a mobile game. It is not exactly, not real casual. It's a Boom Beach made by Supercell, It's a third game they produced. It's a combat game. It looks like Clash of Clans that you all know. Actually, in terms of gameplay, it's different. Boom Beach is a bit more hardcore in terms of game mechanics than Clash of Clans. So I'm just going to show you the beginning of the game. First screen, okay, you see your village, and this guy tells you, hey, there's an emergency. Our village is going to be attacked. We have to defend it. And of course, we see the enemy, evil Lieutenant Hammerman, who looks like the kind of enemy we'd love to hate. All right? So we defend our village. It's very simple. And then we are told, okay, now we need to counterattack. So we need to build a small landing vessel, put soldier in it, and attack the village. Okay, so we've got this map and shows, okay, that's your target. We click on the target. Automatically we go there. Our landing craft lands, the soldier attack, destroy the defense, and the village is free. And we've got this lovely lady that, thanks us for saving her and the villages. Super simple storytelling. This game, it's a combat game. Nearly everything you do in this game is just defending your village and attacking other villages, especially other players' villages. And in spite of that, they put this super storytelling. Why did they do it? Well, the first one is that most people are attracted by stories. This is true. When you think about it, when you are told of an interesting story, you will always raise your ear. So story, it's a universal way. Storytelling, it's a universal way to attract people's attention to your product. Then, more importantly, a story gives purpose to the player's action. Here, player's actions were very simple: defending your village, and after that, rescuing another village. Well, actually, this storytelling gives a bit of purpose to what you do. The result is that you feel like you have completed something useful, and you even might feel good about it. So somehow, this little introduction is creating for a few minutes like a feel-good environment. But most importantly, and that's the main reason they do it, is that storytelling helps the player wait until real gameplay kicks in. This game, it's a combat game. I wouldn't say it's complex, but it has some, many things you have to learn about it before you can actually have fun. So that means that either you push like a boring tutorial, okay, that will last maybe 5 or 6 minutes, and we lose players, or somehow, during the time you explain the game, you just throw this story to make the player wait a little bit, to patience until the real gameplay kicks in. That's the main reason, because after the game starts, forget about the storytelling. It nearly disappears. It's non-existent. Of course, because the core gameplay, people play the game because of the combat, not because of the adventure and so on. But this is something that you will see in many, many games. The thing is that it's done more or less well. Supercell is doing a quite good job on that. Best practice number 3. Offer real gameplay and challenge. And here I should have maybe underlined real gameplay, not fake one. I'm going to give you another example from a completely different genre. This time I will use Real Racing 3, which is a mobile game developed and published by Electronic Arts. Completely different. It's free to play, again, but you will see this game has a completely different audience and content. This is a super high quality, real-time 3D game. And actually, when the game starts, and again, I will show you the first image of the game. When the game starts, it starts with a video, actually. Well, not a video, I think it's a in-game engine scene. And you see, those super, those exciting cars, fast cars racing on a racetrack. So this is not, it's not a fixed image, actually, it is moving, so you can immediately see, this game is about exciting cars, and it's about speed and so on, okay? Very quickly, after this scene, which is just an introduction, you go into the cockpit of one of the cars. So you understand that one of the cars that you saw racing, now you're inside. It's kind of exciting, to drive a Porsche. And obviously, you are moving, this is, again, it's a moving image, all right? Short tutorial, they tell you how to control the vehicle. In this game, you don't control the speed, you can't brake, all you can do is just steer left and right. And actually, it doesn't mean the game is simplistic, it can get very hard to play, but the benefit of that is that you focus on what is important, is just passing your enemies and avoiding losing speed when you go off the road. So it's very simple, you can just, the default method of controlling the vehicle is just by tilting left and right your tablet, your smartphone, okay? Then there's another page of tutorial, I don't have it here, but it just tells you how you can switch camera. You've got like an inside the car camera and an outside, okay? And as soon as you've done that, that's it, you're in the race. So you've got, the green light, red on green, and you are into the real race. And more importantly, look at that. You're actually racing against real people. Those are just not bots. Those are real people. Or at least that's what you believe. Because those are real peoples, but actually those are ghosts. In other words, this person, what's his name, Brozik, he really exists. He has really done the race, but he's not actually connected. But at that stage, you don't know. You've got the feeling you've got, oh my God, I'm racing against real player. So I have to be super good. And of course, the racetrack, it's very simple. Your car has good road handling. The ghosts of the other players are not very difficult. So somehow, you can manage to pass them and to win. But it doesn't matter. You are super excited because you have the feeling you are into a multiplayer game. And as we know, multiplayer, it's the best way to create strong emotions for the players. We all know, the excitement of victory and the bitterness of defeat and so on. And it's real gameplay, because if you fucked up, you can go into the walls, or you can completely, you can lose the race. So, why is it so important? Clearly, here they offer real gameplay. It's not like a fake and so on. Why is this important? Well, for one reason, because real gameplay is what makes, again, this is what makes it so exciting. And real gameplay is exciting because the player is facing a challenge, and he has to take decisions. Here in that case, it's when do I turn and so on, when do I pass and so on. But it doesn't matter. This game, the beginning, is so exciting because the player, there are things at stake. Will I win? Will I arrive first? Will I arrive second? And so on. And the player can achieve that purely if he drives well. So gameplay is what is making the beginning of this game so exciting. Again, you can see the difference with other games where the beginning is super simple. You just need to click here and there. There's no challenge. Here, immediately you are taken into a real challenge. Best practice number 4. Make your game stand out. In other words, if your game has something which is unique, you must show it up. You must show it at the very, very beginning. This is very important because there are so many copycat games, so many games that just look like each other. I mean, there are hundreds of clones of Candy Crush, hundreds clones of Clash of Clans and so on. Even if names are different and the graphics are different, basically, the gameplay looks so similar. So if you've got an idea that makes your game stand out, push it forward so it appears in the very first second. Here again, I'm going to show you an example. It is a smash hit. It's a game made by a Swedish studio, Mediocre. And I tell you, those guys are not mediocre at all. It's an interesting concept, but as you're going to see, this game offers a totally different experience from the very start. First of all, let's look at the splash screen. Just by looking at it, and of course on that screen, the picture is not as bright as it is on a computer screen. You can immediately see, haha, this is different. This is an interesting atmosphere. It's a bit magical. It's strange, So here you can see that art is super useful, super important, to draw people to your game, to your gameplay. And that's just the splash screen, because as soon as you start the game, and actually it starts as soon as you hit start. This is just how it looks like. Just launch a small video. So the music is eerie, and also you immediately discover the gameplay is completely different. It's very simple. It almost works like an endless runner. You just move forward, and you need to avoid hitting the crystal, whatever is in crystal. So you break the crystal pieces by throwing balls at it. So it's very simple gameplay, but quite effective. And just the style, the graphic style is really magical, and so on. So, again, why is it so important to make your game stand out? I kind of hinted at it. Competition is very tough, but more importantly, one of the things that drives players to try a game is often the novelty. And players, they are curious. They are looking for all kind of novelty. It can be a new theme, a new gameplay, like here. It can be, the audio style, the graphic style. It can be the story. No matter what, when you put something new, any player on Earth will immediately be attracted by it. It doesn't mean he's going to play, but at least he's going to try, and that's one of the things we are trying to do: getting people to play our game and getting to play more and more. So, if your game has something with, first of all, my advice is that if you are working on a game, of course, try to be very creative on the concept. Make sure that your game has something that no other game has, and then on top of that, if you succeed, make sure this feature happens from the very start. Like I've seen, I know that sometimes a studio gets like an order from a client, a publisher, for instance, to do a game that looks like that. Do a Candy Crush game, do a Clash of Clans game, and so on. Okay, so the theme is imposed by the client, by the publisher. So what the game designer do? Well, he's trying to improve. He's trying to bring something new. Most game designers understand that people are looking for novelties. So he's going to try to add some kind of new feature in it. The problem is that if you need to wait 5, 10, 15 minutes of gameplay to see this new feature, it's useless. If you bring something new, make sure it appears from the very, very beginning of the game. So people will immediately see the value of the game. What happens quite often is that you try a game because you like the theme. You start playing the game and say, oh no, this is another clone of Clash of Clans. Of course, the graphics are different, the theme is different, yes, but the game experience will be exactly the same because the game is constructed exactly as Clash of Clans. So you just give up, okay? Unless at the very beginning you see, aha, this game has something new I haven't seen, so it's worth going a little bit forward. So again, try always to have something new in your game, and if you cannot change everything, if you cannot offer a completely different theme or gameplay, whatever is new in your game, push it forward from at the very start. Best practice number 5, show to players the scope of the game. In other words, show to the player how big your game is. Size of game, it's important. Again, I'll take Boom Beach as an example. It's a mobile game, so it's not a huge game, of course. That's why I took this example. When you start the game, you can, it's a defense and attack game. So you construct your village, you construct defenses and so on. So you can see all the construction you can have. So of course, at first, you only have very few constructions available. You need to play longer. You need to level up to unlock them. So this is why only one is in colored. All the other constructions are great. You see them. You cannot do them. But at least you know, okay, I see that if I play this game a bit longer, I'll be able to unlock the cool machine gun or the mortar or super gun, or I'll be able to unlock the laboratory and so on. So somehow, it gives you an idea of what the game will be later on if you continue working. So it says, it's okay, this game can be worth that I invest my time in it because I know that eventually I'll be able to do all those exciting things. That's a small example on a mobile game. I'll take a bigger game. I'll take World of Tanks, which is much bigger, obviously. But it's the same. In World of Tanks, when you start, it's a free game of also on PC, Mac, and so on. You get one free tank per nation. They have got, I think, 8 or 9 nations now. So, for instance, this is the French tank, so it's a very small tank. Obviously, you don't want to play very much with it. It's not powerful at all. But very soon, you discover all the other tanks you can unlock. So this is like for the French tank, the progression tree. And obviously, the most exciting tanks, they are here. So think of all the other nations. You want to unlock the British Matilda, the German Tiger, and so on. So that's the purpose of showing that to you. Of course, it will take time until you can unlock that, but at least it tells you, yes, if I continue to play this game, if I invest my time and energy, I'll be able to unlock all those cool vehicles and so on. That's what I mean by showing the scope of the game. So that's important because it just tells the player how much he can get out of the game if he continues playing in it. Best practice number 6. Give the player a good reason to return. And here I'm going to introduce a key feature of many free-to-play games. And when I say many free-to-play games, I include obviously games on PC, and so on. So it's not just mobile and Facebook. It's called the open loop. So what's an open loop? It's very simple. An open loop is made up of an objective and a reward. And you find them in many games. I'll take games like city farming games or construction games like Cityville. For instance, an open loop will be, harvest 5 wheats. And when you have 5 wheats, then you can build like a bakery, for instance. That's the typical open loop. I'm sure you've seen them a lot in games. And as soon as you have completed the open loop, you got the reward, then you got another one, which usually, it's a bit longer to complete. For instance, now you've got the bakery. Make, for instance, 10 loaves of bread, and then, you can open, a shop. Okay, so again, you know how to do it. You have an objective and a reward, which is, in that case, opening up the shop and so on. As soon as you have completed this open loop, then you've got more. Sometimes you've got 2 of them at the same time, and so on. And you've got progression trees like that gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I'm sure that many of you have seen that kind of construction in many, many games. So there's a reason for that. It's because it's very effective, at giving short-term and medium-term objectives to the player, and it's super effective at getting them to invest themselves into the game over a long period of time. So open loop, why do they work so well? Why are they used in so many games? Well, there are several reasons. The first one is that players, as human beings, we tend to enjoy completing tasks that we started. It's in our psychology, that's just, we cannot help. And usually when an open loop is proposed to you, it's already half started. In other words, you already have some of the elements needed to complete it. Very often you've got some kind of progression bar, so I already have 1 wheat. Okay, I just need 3 more, and then I can complete the objective and so on. So that's the first reason. Second reason is that And that's a bit more deeper in the sense that completion does not rest on skill, but on time. Of course, if you are skilled in the game, you are going to level up, you're going to close the loop much faster. But nevertheless, even if you're not a great player, you can still close the loop. And again, I'll take an example from a hardcore game. So what I'm saying, it's not only applicable to casual games. It works also for hardcore games. In World of Tanks, it's exactly the same way. World of Tanks is made up of thousands of open loops. Basically, an open loop is just like to unlock a new tank. To get a new tank, you need to earn enough experience points and credits. And when you have enough, you can get the new tank, which is obviously more exciting than the one you currently have. And to earn those experience points and credits, you earn them no matter what. Even if you're not very good, and usually when you start the game, you're not very good because the game is fairly technical, you still earn those points. So of course, if you're a skilled player, you will earn points 10 times faster, but at least it means that somebody who discovers the game, who is not, a super experienced player, he will still be able to close loops, enjoy it, and see he has a progression. Of course, later on, it gets much more difficult, loops become much longer, and if you're not good at it, then it's going to take for you forever. But at least, those open loop system here makes it possible for absolutely anybody, to have the feeling he can progress in the game and unlock things. And the third reason is that important is that when you close the loop, you unlock something, a feature that is beneficial to game experience. It's not like you don't unlock points or a score or useless things. No, you always unlock things that will just make your game better. For instance, you unlock a new building. That's how it works in like Cityville. You unlock new tanks in World of Tanks and so on. So basically, player understands the benefit of closing a loop. And that's what is making open loops very effective. And actually, open loops is the core mechanism for what we call medium-term retention. Okay. So, just a little summary of the best practices that we saw. Get the player into the game as fast as possible. Add, if possible, some storytelling. Offer real gameplay and challenges. Make your game stand out. Show the player the scope of the game and give the player a good reason to return. Fine. Now, obviously, I wouldn't be complete without also telling you about bad practices. And I'm just going to highlight a few of them, things not to do at all costs. So, worst practice number 1, or number 5, okay, we'll have a countdown, okay. Don't ask the player to register before he has retried the game. Many games are asking the players to sync, for instance, their Facebook account with the game, or to give their email. It's quite valid. Don't do it until the player has tried the game and estimated, yes, this game is fun enough. I accept to, sync my Facebook account or give my email. This is very important. Sometimes even asking the player to enter a nickname is gamer tags, gamer tab. Some players will see that, well, this game is asking too much from me, I'm not doing it. So it's very important that if you need the player to register to your game, or if you want your player to sync his Facebook account, be patient, okay? Don't do it now. Don't do it from the very start. Okay. There's just one exception, of course. It's when you want the client to download, when you need your player to download the client, like League of Legends, World of Tanks, you just cannot play in web browser, so you need to download the big client. It makes sense. But otherwise, those are really for hardcore gamers, for casual gamers, just don't do it. I'll just tell you a little story here. It's interesting. A few years ago, I worked on a game which was a Facebook game. It was a racing game, like a little bit like Mario Kart on Facebook. It was made by Kainuu, a French company. And the idea was to make a game which was real-time, 3D real-time in Facebook, and multiplayer. And the technology was available. It was actually a Unity plugin. Unity provided a really nice and effective plugin that makes it possible to have real-time 3D in Facebook, okay? That was before HTML5. And Unity themselves, they say, well, and how does it work as a user? You launch the game, and then you just need to click a button and say install whatever, install Unity and so on, And Unity people told us, that when we have this button, we lose 30% of people just because they need to click a button to install something. When you're targeting casual players, they're not used to that. They're not used to installing things, installing drivers, updating, they just want to click and it's got to work, Whenever you ask them something they don't understand, they just get out. So to tell you, how sensitive this audience is, you can casual audience is huge, but it's also very, very easy to lose. So this is why I say that if you need to have somebody install a client, just make sure you are targeting, experienced players. Okay, worst practice number 4. Don't start the game with a boring tutorial. That's kind of pretty an obvious one. I'm sure that many of you understand it. If tutorials cannot be shortened to the maximum, just you need to have tutorial pop-ups, of course, but just please avoid pop-ups like this one, okay? Like here, this pop-up tells you, well, you have a list of friends and you can scroll through it by hitting the keys, everybody knows that, even casual players, So don't bother the player, don't force him to read this kind of boring tutorial. Another example, also, here, this pop-up tutorial, first of all, it's too long. You've got five lines of, tight packed letter. And then it talks about adventure. At this level, the player doesn't know what an adventure is. So you are teaching him something, you are talking to him about something he doesn't understand. What's the point? So he's going to read something, will not understand it, and guess what will happen? He says, well, I don't understand the game, I just leave. So that's what I mean. If you must have some kind of tutorial, make sure, it is relevant. So this is why, so a good tutorial, it is relevant, it is talking about important things. The idea is that you want to have as few sentences as possible, as few interruptions in the game as possible. So you really want to talk about what is important. It has to make sense. In other words, the player has to understand immediately by reading the text what it's all about and why it is important. That's more important. And then, of course, make it short. Get the player into the game as soon as possible. Now, of course, some other games cannot do that because they offer complex gameplay, and that's quite valid. So in that case, what you have to do is that you have to make sure that you intertwine tutoring and gameplay. So mixing them in a very smart way. If it's done well, you can really teach very complex game mechanics to the player. Of course, it will take him maybe several hours, or several days, but essentially he will enjoy himself. And whenever he discovers a new feature, he will practice it immediately and he will see the benefit of it. And remember, the best way to learn is by actually doing things, not reading text. Okay, worst practice number 3. Okay, don't put forward the shop. That's something we see in many games. Basically, it sends the players the wrong message. Well, either that this game will require money, people hate that, or even worse, is that you are just rapacious, basically just want money. So don't be too eager to generate revenue from your app. I know that we are all in this business, because we need to generate revenue, we need to, pay employees and pay electricity and the pizza and so on. Okay, yes. But the thing is that you have to understand, and I'm sure that most of you know that people, want to play those free games because they know they are free. If they realize that there's too much pressure put on them, they just quit. They don't go any further. And it's even worse if your audience is made up, of experienced gamers. So you have to take, when you do a free-to-play games, you have to take the risk of being generous, giving many things to the player, knowing that it's in the long run that players will eventually, start spending money in it. Worst practice number 2. Don't frustrate the player before he got a real taste for the game. Now, we know that in freemium design, frustration is one of the key strategy to generate revenue. Okay, The thing is that, again, you don't want this frustration to kick in too early. It's a bit similar to what I said previously. In the difference is that here, that affects the gameplay. And actually, this is kind of difficult to do. It requires some really fine-tuned gameplay because eventually, you need, to start frustrating the player, but you need to do it in a very soft way. In other words, frustration should really kick in when you know that the player is enjoying the game, has medium-term objectives, like closing loops, and, is decided to come back. If frustration kicks in too early, most players will just leave immediately. So that's kind of a difficult thing to do, but I think you get the general idea. Don't frustrate players too early. And then we'll do for the worst practice number 1, which is, to me, it's kind of the heart of everything. Basically, don't offer a boring game experience. That's, I think it's the main thing we can say about game, is that don't show the player something he has already seen. Don't offer a game with no challenge. We are doing games. This is the challenge that's making the game so exciting. And of course, don't offer a core gameplay that offer few choices to the player. So again, and that's just my conclusion, is that the best way, to generate revenue is just to do a good game. Thank you very much. Thank you. We have a time for a few questions. Otherwise, I'll still run. Yes. You want my microphone? Yes. Oh.
Thank you. Hello. Oh yeah. So hello. I have a question about this. I will see it maybe. I have a question about this worst practice about tutorial where there was a thing about those arrows. Like it's obvious to the player, but I read an article recently about the situation when the author played with a friend who wasn't actually like a gamer, and there was a situation when this friend had low health, and he didn't realize it because he didn't know that red bar is health, and it like took an author to like explain him that the red bar is health, the blue one is magic, and so on. And this is like the mobile game, let's say, those casual games are like intended for people who are not gamers. And how do you feel like those pretty obvious for us things can be conveyed to this like pure casual player?
Thank you. That's a very good point. The thing is that clearly, if it's a game with a health bar and magic bar, if the characters can die pretty quickly, it's not the casual games. So the thing is that probably this person just did not play the right game, I would say, for him. So in that case, it's like if I give to you, a game like, I don't know, like a complex game like Leaves of Legend, and I throw you into, a competition, you'll be completely lost, even if you are a gamer yourself. It's the same thing. So I think there's just no answer. You have to know your audience. This is very important, I think it's an error to do a game and attempt to please everybody. You just can't. You'll be much more successful by knowing your audience and just targeting it. I would even say that you should not hesitate to go for a niche strategy. That means, okay, maybe you'll do a game for just one small segment of players, but because now you can basically touch players everywhere in the world through digital distribution, you'll find your players. But by targeting the player, exactly, you'll be able to meet his demands. Thank you. Any other question? Yes? You don't have to stand up, it was just...
Okay, thank you. So I will sit. I would like to ask you, are you going to add new lessons for your application which learns game design, game toolbox? Or are you maybe going to contain this knowledge in some book or something? Okay, thank you.
Any other question? Okay, no need to throw the microphone. Okay.
Okay, you said that it's very important to have as lot open loops as it's possible to have very original and attractive metagame. But when you are working on new app, a new game, and making this complex game, it took a lot of time and efforts and of course money. And you want to publish MVP, for example, maybe not MVP, but ready game, but not so complex, not so vast as a final app. And this is a risk. Shouldn't do this, or you can somehow test your ideas for a game without risking that you spend 1 or 2 years on making game which won't success because of not interesting, for example, gameplay.
It's a difficult question to answer because I don't really have an example in mind. Again, what I said today are just general rules. In my experience, they apply in nearly all situations, but there are always exceptions. Fortunately, otherwise we'll all be copycats of each other, you know. So probably in certain situations, yes, open loop, you know, can be used much later on. But my understanding is that from super casual games like Candy Crush or Cityville to hardcore games like League of Legends, World of Tanks, they're all using open loop. The difference is that they're triggered in different way. In other words, they in games like Cityville, for instance, open loops will come in pretty short, you know, because you'll be like limited, you know, by the energy points. In World of Tanks, you know, they'll come in much later. But in any case, you know, I'll always see open loops. Any other question? Well, thank you very much. Oh yes, one more. Yes, okay.
What are the differences in onboarding in free-to-play and premium games?
Okay, well, there are actually many differences. I would say the main one is that, you mean the difference regarding onboarding between a casual audience and a more hardcore, or you're talking about premium and free-to-play? Okay. Well, the big difference is that when the player have bought your game, you know, basically you don't need to be as you don't need to take them by the hand as much as you would in a free-to-play games. Another thing also is that if indeed people have bought the game, usually they are looking for a more complex experience. You know, it can be an adventure game, it can be like a shooter game, a management, you know, there are many things. For those games, it's a little bit different. People expect a certain onboarding. For instance, if you play an adventure game, if you buy an adventure game, you know, you expect very little tutorials. Not only because the game is simple, but because you want to be immersed into the story first. So those games usually feature a pretty long introduction. I'm not saying you don't play there, but at least, you know, you're not swamped by mechanism. On the other hand, if you buy a game with management or combat and so on, you know it's going to be complex and you're looking for this difficulty, and then you expect to have rule tutorials. You even expect this tool maybe to be short but dense because you want to play right away with all the mechanisms. So you see, it really depends on the game style, on the game genre. Any other question? Thank you very much. Enjoy the party this evening. Thank you again.